The Lazarus Protocol. The laboratory was a cathedral of glass and humming electricity, a sanctuary for Dr. Elena Voss's obsession. She stood alone amidst the flickering monitors, her hands trembling as she adjusted the neural injectors. It was supposed to be a routine simulation of cellular decay, but the screen suddenly spiked with impossible data. A dormant brain, disconnected for hours, began to glow with bioluminescent thought on the holographic display. She hadn't just observed life, she had accidentally reignited it. The discovery was intoxicating, a spark that threatened to set her world on fire. Her success was shadowed by Dr. Adrian Keller, her brilliant and relentless rival. He paced the perimeter of the lab, his eyes sharp with a mixture of envy and genuine suspicion. They had spent years competing for the same grants, but this breakthrough felt different, dangerous. "You're playing with a power you don't understand, Elena," he warned, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. While Elena saw a miracle of science, Adrian saw a breach of the natural order, a bridge to a place humans were never meant to tread. The rivalry ended in a sudden, violent flash of heat and shattered glass. During a late-night calibration of the high-energy perfusion system, a massive power surge tore through the facility. Adrian, caught in the middle of a diagnostic check, was struck directly by a kinetic discharge. He fell silently, the light leaving his eyes before his body even hit the floor. The machinery around him groaned and hissed, leaving the room in a state of smoldering ruin. Panic transformed into a cold, clinical resolve. Elena couldn't let him die, not like this. She dragged Adrian's limp body to the Lazarus cradle, a neural perfusion system she had designed to bypass the finality of death. With steady, blood-stained hands, she initiated the unsanctioned protocol, pumping oxygenated synthetic blood and experimental neurotransmitters into his cooling brain. It was a criminal act, a violation of every ethical code she had ever sworn to uphold, but she was driven by a desperate, selfish need to undo the tragedy. The monitors suddenly screamed to life. Adrian's chest surged with a violent heave as he gasped for air that his lungs didn't yet know how to process. His eyes snapped open, but they weren't the sharp, intelligent eyes Elena remembered. They were wide, unfocused, and filled with a terrifying ancient depth that seemed to look through her rather than at her. For a moment, they shared a look of pure, unadulterated shock. He was back, pulled from the threshold, but the silence he brought back with him was deafening. The days that followed were a descent into a waking nightmare. Adrian didn't speak. He whispered to the shadows in the corners of the lab. He began scrawling complex, jagged equations and impossible geometric patterns on the walls, using charcoal and his own blood. He became convinced that something had followed him back through the veil, a presence that hummed in the low frequencies of the room. "The door is still open," he muttered, his voice trembling with a paranoia that chilled Elena to the bone. The end came swiftly. Before Elena could find a way to stabilize him, Adrian took his own life, leaving behind a room filled with cryptic symbols. Within hours, the laboratory was swarmed. Elena wasn't met by police, but by a military strike team led by Commander Silas Thorne. They seized her data and her freedom with cold efficiency. As Thorne led her away in handcuffs, she saw the insignia of the Department of Defense on his tactical gear. Her accident hadn't gone unnoticed. She had been a pawn in a game she didn't know was being played. Years passed in a gray blur of concrete and iron. Inside the high-security military prison, Elena learned the truth through smuggled reports and the whispers of other disposable assets. The Lazarus Protocol wasn't just her project. It was a sub-initiative of a larger Department of Defense program aimed at post-mortem intelligence retrieval. They wanted soldiers who could report back from the field, even after death. Her experiment on Adrian had been the proof of concept they needed to move to Phase 2. Upon her eventual release, Elena was a ghost in a world that had forgotten her name. She returned to her old apartment, only to find a hidden hard drive tucked behind a loose vent. It contained Adrian's final brainwave recordings from the moments after his revival. As she ran the data on a burner laptop, she saw it. The waves weren't chaotic. They were structured, It was a signal, a complex, rhythmic code embedded in his consciousness. Adrian hadn't been paranoid. He had been a receiver for something on the other side. A sharp knock at the door shattered the silence. Standing in the hallway was a woman named Vane, dressed in a sharp, gray suit. "Dr. Voss," Vane said, her voice like ice. "You've spent a long time looking at the signal. It's time you learned what it's saying." Vane held out a small, metallic triangular device that pulsed with the same violet light as the original Lazarus Protocol. Elena realized the conspiracy didn't end with the military. There were those who had been waiting for the door to open, and they were finally ready to step through.